Yes. All right, welcome to the December 2nd Medfield Select Board meeting. I suspect most of you are not here for the tax classification hearing, but we do have that scheduled to start at 6 p.m. As I think you all know, we're going to be joined later on in the meeting by the warrant committee and the school committee to talk about budget issues. But for starters here, first, remind everybody that's in the room that this meeting is being broadcast and recorded, so it's being videotaped, and there'll be people from outside the room that can tune into the meeting. If you are speaking, we would ask you, I guess, to use that lectern right up there, because I think that's the only microphone. And that microphone's purpose is not to amplify your voice in the room. It's to pick up the audio feed for Medfield TV so that the people that are tuning in from outside can hear what's being said. Before we get started, as is always the case, I'd like to just take a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the world in defense of our country. Thank you. Okay, the first appointment we have scheduled for 6 p.m. is the tax classification hearing presented by Yvonne Remillard, Principal Assessor. And the first item here, oh no, that's the first item. That is the first item. I was thinking number one was the thing we were going to get done, but sorry, Yvonne, take it away.
Okay, so every year by statute, the select board must decide if you want to split the rate or not. So here I am. It is the responsibility of the Board of Assessors to provide the select board with relevant information regarding the fiscal effects of splitting the tax rate. So I'm going to first discuss what the town has historically maintained, which is the single tax rate. Now, I expected a larger crowd, so I did change my presentations. So anyway, so it's not the same old one. So a single tax rate is when each class of property pays a share of the tax levy equal to its share of the total town value. So where do we start? We start with the town meeting voted appropriations of around 85 million. To that, we add the unappropriated amounts to be raised. This includes the overlay, state charges, municipal building stabilization fund, which the select board votes every year, and the snow and ice deficit. From that, we subtract the estimated revenue to come up with the total that must be raised in taxes, which is around 57.8 million. This amount must be less than the maximum allowable levy. So this is the levy limit sheet taken from the Department of Revenue tax recap that we annually submit. So in order to determine the levy, we take last year's levy limit, which is shown here. We add to that 2.5%. We add new growth. We then would add any override. If we had an operational override, it would appear here. And then that becomes our fiscal 26 levy limit base. These items in section 2 are considered permanent as they permanently increase the levy limit going forward. To that, we add in those things that are not considered permanent and voted outside of Prop 2.5, which includes the debt exclusions and the municipal building stabilization fund override. As you can see, the maximum allowable levy is 57.9 million, which is higher than our 57.8 million, so we are in good shape. So, back to the single tax rate. To achieve this, we divide the amount to be raised in taxes by the total taxable town value to get a single tax rate of $13.52 for fiscal year 26. With a single tax rate, a residential property assessed at $1 million or a commercial property assessed at $1 million both pay the same amount of tax at $13,520. So overall, what does this mean? Well, basically, it means that the percentage of taxes to be paid by each class of property correlates directly with the percentage of the total town value for each class of property. So as you can see by the two charts, the top chart is the taxes portion, and the second chart is the values portion. And you can see that the residential properties portion in both of those are the same at 95.08. So I hear this question a lot. If we split the tax rate, won't that create more revenue? Well, the answer to that is no, and I'll explain why. Splitting the rate reduces the share of the tax levy paid by the residential property owners and shifts those taxes to the commercial owners. We start pretty much in the same place. Town meeting appropriations, we add the unappropriated amounts, we subtract the estimated revenue, and we're at 57.8 million. Well, actually, we're a little less. So what changed? We are actually raising less in taxes? Well, for fiscal 26, we would be. So what changed? The unappropriated amounts to be raised changed. With a split tax rate, we would be raising 2.124 million versus a single tax rate where we would be raising 2.125. This changed because we are now rounding 2 tax rates instead of 1. The overlay has to adjust to accommodate for the rounding, so that is about $850 difference. Overlay is a single account to fund abatements and exemptions of committed real and personal property taxes for any fiscal year. The overlay amount is determined by the Board of Assessors and may be raised in the tax rate without appropriation. Since it is not an appropriation, it is used in the tax rate recap to round the final formulas to 2 decimals to get dollars and cents. Example, 1352. You can't have a tax rate that would be 13.52781. So this is a part of page 2 of the state recap. And here are those unappropriated amounts that I talked about. We have the state charges of 34,646 here and 610,530. Our snow and ice deficit appears here, and the Municipal Building Stabilization Fund override. And here is our overlay. The only one that can be modified is the overlay, as it is an estimate that the Board of Assessors votes on. All of the other numbers are set. The warrant committee members should remember that the estimate given back when we were budgeting was $200,000. So back to the split rate. We are going to assume for this example that the select board is going to split the rate, the maximum amount it can, which is 50%. This means that the commercial properties would have to pay 1.5 times the amount of taxes they would be paying under a single rate. So if you recall, the commercial property assessed at $1 million under a single tax rate pays $13,520. But under the new split tax rate, it would pay $20,280, an additional $67.60. The total to be raised remains almost the same at our $57.8 million. But here are the new percentages and how the taxes would be split by each class. Here are our values again. And if you remember, with a single tax rate, the percentage paid matches the percentage share of the total values. So with the single rate, our residential portions both were 95.08%. Now our residential portion has dropped by 2.5% to 92.62, and the commercial are making up the difference. Their increase is 150%. So with a 50% maximum shift, the commercial rate would be $20.28 and the residential rate would be $13.17 for fiscal 26. So our property assessed at $1 million. The residential property would now pay $13,170 under the new split rate versus $13,520 under a single rate for a savings of $350. And remember, that's the maximum savings. So here are our surrounding towns. Walpole and Westwood are again the only two that continue to split the rate as they have larger commercial bases. Typically, you do not see towns splitting rates unless their residential percentage is lower than 90%. Here are your single-family averages. Overall values have increased approximately 4.75% from last year, and that's why you would see a tax rate drop. Individual parcel valuations may vary from the average class increase due to typical differences, data updates and corrections, new construction, and the effect of market trends for specific characteristics. Not everybody goes up 4.75%. Vote. Adopting a residential factor of 1 will result in the taxation of all property at the same rate. Adopting a residential factor of 0.974128 would split the tax rate the maximum amount of 50%. The Select Board can also choose to shift the tax rate any percentage up to 50%. Do you have any questions?
We do. If I look at I'm learning things here. I'm glad you switched it up because I picked up some stuff. But the surrounding towns FY25 tax rates, it said that the maximum you can split the rates is 50%. I look at Westwood, where the residential rate is $12.80 and the CIP rate is $24.26. That's nearly 100% increase. How did they do that?
So the maximum that we can shift in Medfield is 50% because of our residential percentage, okay?
Oh.
So Westwood has a lower residential percentage, so they might be able to shift. The maximum anybody can shift is 75%. So I would have to go back and figure out what the math would be, because we don't know what their values are here. So they could be shifting higher than that 50%. So the maximum anybody in the state that has a certain, I can't remember what the residential percentage is, but because our residential percent is so high, it's like 95, we can only shift 50%.
It seems like the people who don't have much to be able to shift it.
Well, what you're doing is you're shifting a tremendous amount onto the commercial, as you could see you see it really clear in the single example, but.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Sure. I can look and see how much they shift and let you know.
No question. This is kind of a straightforward exercise.
The thing that decides it for me every year is the fact that there's very little to be gained on the residential property owners' side from doing this, but a ton of extra tax for the commercial industrial that we're trying to encourage. And so it doesn't make sense to me to discourage them by having that huge increase on their rate.
Right. Exactly. I mean, with a $13,000 tax bill, $350 really isn't a lot, but.
Any other comments? Public hearing, right? Any comments from the audience? Great, I guess we're ready for motion.
No comments online?
I would move to adopt a residential factor of 1 for all property which will result in the taxation of all property at the same rate for the next fiscal year.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
This truly is the least controversial vote we take every year, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne.
That was good for my brain to get
Very
a different explanation,
Oh, good. I'm glad.
because I didn't understand it as well.
All right, now our next item is Georgia Kalivas, Treasurer Collector, to recommend that $395,004 left over from a borrowing for a fire engine approved in 2021 and $34,773.31 left over from a borrowing for the town garage construction approved in 2013 and $129.34 left over from a borrowing for a sidewalk tractor approved in 2021 be repurposed by applying it to existing debt service obligations as allowed under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20.
So you said everything I was going to say.
Very
So
efficient.
this is a housekeeping item. I'm here this evening. Whenever whenever we've completed or discontinued a project that has a surplus balance from bond proceeds, the treasurer has the authority to ask the select board as to how the money should be repurposed based on the following options under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20. Because the three items are under the $50,000 threshold, the select board has the authority to vote to apply it to any existing debt service obligation. And that is why I'm here this evening. So I am asking you to move that $395.04 left over from the fire engine be applied to the fiscal year 27 debt service, $34,773.31 left over from the town garage construction approved in 2013 be also applied to the fiscal year 27 debt service, and $129.34 left over from the borrowing of a sidewalk tractor approved in 2021 be applied to fiscal year 27 debt service, for a total of $35,297.69. This will be used as another financing source in fiscal year 27 to reduce the debt service.
So moved.
Second.
I have one question. So there's the normal debt service that would be based on what our schedule for repayment is. All we're doing here is allowing this to be a funding source for that normal debt service. We're not paying down the debt faster.
So if
We're just
my fiscal
contributing.
year 27 debt service was $1 million, I would be reducing the $1 million by $35,000.
The $1 million that comes off out of the tax levy?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Or-
Yeah, I did second.
Aye,
Yep.
all right. No, I knew you did. I just didn't ask if anybody else had questions besides me. That's good. Okay, so that's approved.
All right, thank you.
We now have, the next scheduled item is not going to occur till 7 PM when we are joined by the warrant committee and the school committee, so we'll just move on with our agenda. Next item is, it's really a discussion item. It's a report out on the gristmill agreement between the town of Medfield and the owners of 6 Gristmill Road. The point here is just to simply report to the town that the select board has reached an agreement, a legal agreement, with the owners of that property to basically, I would say, clarify what the outcome of the disagreement or the dispute that occurred, what that outcome will be. For those who aren't even aware of what we're talking about here, back earlier this year, the town made some modifications to property on the backside of the Kingsbury Pond Gristmill site. So the town owns the gristmill, town owns the land in front of the gristmill, but historically the town has been provided with access to the private property that's even farther in than just that road that runs in front of the gristmill. There's been a circle there for a number of years where people could either park in the circle or they would go around the circle to get out. Recently, the owner of the property had complained or had concerns about after-hours parties that were going on there and wanted to install a gate to prevent people from being able to get in onto his property, which is sort of understandable. In the course of pursuing approval for that gate, some things came out. Number one, that the town had made some modifications to the land itself to improve drainage, but nonetheless, it was carried out without the owner's permission and technically without the town's conservation commission's permission. The way that early discussion was handled led to some contentious views and disputes and disagreements. It's taken us 6 months or more of going back and forth to reach a formal agreement that would resolve everything. The select board, on a 2-to-1 vote, approved that agreement, and at least 2 out of 3 felt that was where we came out was a place that we could live with, that addressed any legal issues that either we or the owners might have, that resolved or certainly took the possibility that either party would be suing the other in court. We wanted to avoid legal action if we could. So we reached agreement to do that. That agreement has now been approved by both parties and is signed. So I guess if there's any either of you have anything further to add on the synopsis there.
Well, I'll be the one so I voted no. I was the person that actually met with this resident, and this just, in my opinion, went further than the original discussion, so I just didn't feel comfortable signing it, so that's why I don't support that letter.
So the town, in my estimation, I guess, violated a neighbor's property rights without permission, and so that we needed to get to a resolution. This was a resolution that doesn't really hurt the town in any way going forward, and was my determination, so I thought it was a good solution to get to an end result.
Mark?
So the fully executed agreement will be available for inspection at some point in the near future, probably at the town clerk, if not the select board offices. I did want to emphasize two things. Number one, the town has some utility easements that were not involved in this dispute and were expressly excluded. There's also a private scheme of common restriction with homeowners, trails in that vicinity, and those were also not addressed. That's outside the agreement.
So, Mark, maybe you could just clarify that, because we did get an email that I forwarded to you from the neighbor who was concerned about this agreement because it came up just before Thanksgiving and they hadn't had time to consult with attorneys. But this doesn't affect any of the neighbor's rights at all, does it?
It does, it's specifically that the existence of that specifically is excluded. It's only addressed insofar as the town will not be responsible for the actions of any people who live in the neighborhood who have rights to those easements. But that's an entirely separate matter. That's on record that the registry was set up when the original developer did Grist Mill Road and preservation.
Yeah, so that this agreement doesn't affect what people have from their recorded rights.
Not at all.
And Mark, you made a comment about people could go to the town hall. The document that was in our packet for tonight, nothing's changed from that the Courtneys have signed. So if somebody even wanted to go to our packet and read the document, it's there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Just
but
as
there will be
a,
a hard copy presumably
Okay.
somewhere as well, archived.
if you get above this legal dispute that we have finally resolved, this town has a lot of private property owners who voluntarily make their property available for public use. The most obvious one, the most significant one, has got to be the Norfolk Hunt Club, but they're not the only one. And if you step back far enough from this whole situation, one lesson I hope everyone takes, certainly private property owners in terms of, what they are willing and not willing to do, but what the town and the people who are acting on behalf of the town, I hope will take away, is the fact that when private property owners make their property voluntarily available to the public, we ought to be doing all that we can in that process to where it's the town or people in town that are not the owners of the property, all we can to make sure we maintain the positive relationships that reinforce the idea that private property owners can be comfortable doing that. Perhaps this was a situation that could have been avoided early in the process had that predisposition been predominant in the overall discussions that took place.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Just a minor correction, Mr. Chair. I think that probably the trustees of the reservation is the largest property owner in town that makes their land available to others.
At a cost.
At a cost.
You have
gotta pay
to join.
Well, you don't have to pay to use the Rocky Woods. You can go.
Well, at any
have to
point,
park there.
so I will, without knowing the acreage exactly, I will say the Norfolk Yacht Club is significant, and I will gladly concede to your better knowledge of the acreage and say, and so are the trustees. That's the point, is that there's a lot of land that is privately owned that is made available for the public's enjoyment. We should recognize that, respect it, and do all we can to maintain the relationships that allow that to continue. Correct. Third item, board and committee appointments. Vote to appoint Sean Tiernan to the role of Associate Planning Board Member as recommended by the Planning Board on 11/17/25. We'll do these one at a time for the different groups.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Second item, vote to appoint Rich Ryder to the Council on Aging Board.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
I was surprised to learn that Rich Ryder wasn't still on the board, but
I know, that's right.
He had left for a few years.
he left
That's
for
what I
a
thought. I
few
was
years.
like, I thought he was already on it.
Okay, he's just my go-to guy. Anytime
dragged
we
him right
question on
back
COA. All right, good. Item four, oops, yes, we're good?
Yep.
Okay. Item four, vote to submit the select board feedback to the zoning board regarding Rose Bay 40B project at 30 Pound Street. I have just a couple of questions on that. I don't think any of it derails us approving it if you all are comfortable with it, but
You might want to note that there is a meeting on Thursday night with the zoning board, so that any residents that have any questions, especially neighbors, Thursday night would be the night that they'd want to chime in.
so the only minor comments I had, I read through it all again and remembered pretty much everything that was there. There were a couple of points, and these are more editorial, I guess. There were a couple things. There was a comment about the master development agreement on page 2. And it talked about the fact that this document has not been shared with town officials and may contain relevant information. I was thinking that action has been taken. And if it has, because this is the old letter we had.
Right.
But since this was first drafted, hasn't the master development agreement been made available? Okay.
Let me double
So,
check on that. But I
so
don't believe so.
my broad editorial comment is there's a couple of things that I'm asking about here. If any of those actions have already taken place since we first drafted this letter, if we just put a parenthetical note that says, this is an action that has subsequent to the original submission of this letter has been resolved. The reason I think to do that is if any of these have already been corrected, and if we would hope that the state would take a serious look at the things we've called out. If we basically hit them a couple times with something that's already been fixed, I'm concerned that they would be less focused on following up on the ones that are still out there. So that was one. The fourth one down on development schedule inconsistencies. This was the one that had 50% construction completion date projected for October 2027, when the construction completion was listed as June 2027, 4 months earlier. I thought that one had been corrected as well, so that one might be another one. And then I think those are there were a couple of typos. Those are the only two that I picked up on with what I thought I knew. That it's just, if it's already been fixed, we ought to acknowledge that.
We will take care of that. I just sent a note to Maria. Double check.
Okay. Any other comments?
No, I think as long as you vote to sign it, we'll get it to Maria and they can move on.
My opinion about this project remains the same, which is that it's a wonderful project. It's in an unfortunate location, and that the scale of the project is out of character with the neighborhood. I think that in my mind, the need for this housing that is offered to seniors regardless of income is so important that, to me, that tilts in favor of supporting this happening, despite the adverse effects on the neighborhood, unfortunately.
Well, the only good thing about the size of this is by looking at the way it's been designed, he's actually building into the backside. So if you walk through by the entrance to the gym here at the high school, the bulk of the height will be facing the bulk of the height of the school here. So to the street, you actually lose a level. So it only looks like a 2-story because it dips down in the back. So knowing he's doing that, it definitely is bigger than Tilden Village, that's for sure. But considering it's 2025 and the other one was built in, I think, 1970, I just know there's a meeting on Thursday night. It's really important for the neighbors that are interested to attend. It'll be a chance to ask the developer questions that they've been posing to other committees, but the only meeting that the developer was required to attend is this ZBA meeting. So that's at 6 o'clock on Thursday night. And I know that Maria's been fantastic with sending out emails to the neighbors. I followed up with a few that had sent me emails over the last year and a half. And then there was a neighbor that took responsibility to do an email chain with all the information for Thursday. So I think there'll be a good attendance for the Thursday meeting.
Okay, and you are correct, we do have the master development agreement,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
so we'll edit that comment.
And one other detail, going back at you, you said open to seniors without regard to income. I think this is all 100% affordable, right?
Yeah.
So they need to qualify on affordability. As I recall, it was from reading this, but it was 20 or 40% is actually at 40% of AMI, not even 60%. So it's 100% affordable for seniors. So I think your main point was it's housing for seniors.
Well, it's housing for seniors, but it's also different than Wilkins Glen and other housing for seniors where they have to pay a larger amount. At Tilden, the people pay a percentage of their income, is my understanding, and so that regardless of what your income is, you can live there, which isn't the case at the park and at Wilkins Glen. So this is it's allows for even poorer seniors to live there. So I think that's a good
So
result.
regardless of, even if you don't have a lot of income, when you said regardless of income, it sounded like, well, you could be making $1 million a year and you come. That, you didn't mean that half, you meant the
No,
the low income
just
part.
that
Got it.
you pay a percentage of your income, whatever
Yeah.
your income is, and if your income is very little, you pay very little then, and you still get to live there.
You just didn't want a stampede of all these retirees selling their houses,
Yeah.
decided to get cash in on it.
Yeah, that's what we heard about at those 6 select board meetings that we used to go to, the 40Bs and the Millises and Medways, where people would move in and
Yep.
live at.
Question.
Oh, question, sure.
Yeah, I can't get on the network here for some bizarre reason.
Oh, you can't, okay.
Yeah, that's why I'm not on.
This is from Jeff Hyman.
It tells
What
me
is
I'm
the
not
select
supposed
board's
to go.
position regarding the fire chief's concern that Medfield would not have the ability to reach a 40-foot height of the proposed structure?
That's a good question. I think the observation has been made. So Christine, I'm going to toss that one to you. The issue is,
Technicalities.
the issue is the fire department said we don't have ladders that are high enough to get to the 3rd floor.
Yep.
I think that translates into we have to get, if this goes forward, we have to get a ladder truck that will reach it, right?
That is correct, and we have a ladder truck in the capital budget that's been requested, and we're also having discussions with the developer of the project about the need for a ladder truck to go to the top floor.
Would
So I
would
hope
prevent
that
them from-
answers Jeff's question.
Oh.
Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
I think we're ready to vote. Yep,
Are we voting on this?
I think we have to vote to sign it.
You have to vote to sign the, authorize Brittany and I to send the letter.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Good to go on that one. Another 20 minutes before our 7 o'clock appointment. So next, we have a vote to open the town meeting warrant. The warrant will close on January 13th, 2026. While the warrant is open, that's the opportunity for anyone who would like to get an article on the town meeting warrant to get that submitted and put in place.
So moved.
Second. Sorry.
All in favor?
Trying to help you get online.
Aye, aye.
Help you with any question. Aye.
Aye, okay. I guess we can have a town meeting this year.
I'm using the high school guest, Eileen, if you want to use the high school guest, it's available.
It's more fun without a laptop, you know that? They've got enough coverage. I don't know, all this hassle is so much easier.
Chris, do you have an extra agenda? You have an extra agenda?
I do.
Oh, best of luck.
It was here, it was in the file. You can have it.
It wasn't in my file.
It's the stuff I brought. Anyway, I always print one out, as long as you don't change it up before the meeting. Next item, a vote to approve the sign request to advertise the 2026 Medfield Volunteer Fair at Medfield Transfer Station. The fair's not at the transfer station, it's the signs that are going at the transfer station. Intersection of North and Main Street, sidewalk jet out. Intersection of Route 109 and Hartford Street, northeast corner of Route 27 and South Street, from December 26th to January 10th. I will make the observation, driving by that corner at South Street and 27, that there's a big pile. I'm sitting there saying, did we actually approve all this? But I think we did. We just haven't been, there's a lot of signs there. But anyway.
So moved.
Second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. That takes care of the consent agenda. There are no gifts. There is no citizen comment. We have no meeting minutes. Town administrator updates.
Short week due to the Thanksgiving holiday, so I hope everybody enjoyed their time with family and friends, and that is the only update I have this evening.
Not going to help me fill in the 20
Nope,
minutes between now.
I'm working on it.
The next meeting date we have this month is December 16th. In January, we'll have, generally speaking, we have meetings on the first and third Tuesdays of the month, but there are a few exceptions. January is not one of them. We have the first meeting in January on the 6th. The second one is on the 20th. In February, the first meeting is on the 3rd. The second is on the 17th. In March, the first meeting is on the 3rd of March. Must be a leap year if it's the same Tuesday. And the second one in March is the 17th.
St. Patty's Day.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's not a leap year. Right. I'm losing count. Thank you.
St. Patrick's
Thank you.
Day. You gonna wear green?
Again. March 30th is our annual town election. Perhaps some of us will be reelected during that election. We're not sure yet. April 7th, first meeting is the 7th of April. The second is the 21st of April. May 5th is our annual town meeting. It's a typo.
It was May 5th last year.
May 5th last year, but that was a leap year, so we, yeah.
May the 4th be with
Yeah, May the 4th. No, May the 4th be with us. Yes. This is the exception, our first meeting, we'll probably have an informal meeting then, so technically that's our first meeting. But our next meeting will be May 12th, and then following that, the next week is May 19th. So that'll be our final meeting for May. In June, our meetings are on the 2nd and the 16th of June. And if the town behaves as well as the town behaved this past summer, we will get away with single meetings in the months of July and August. They would be July 14th and August 18th. With that, select board member reports.
Like Christine, there's not a lot. I think the only thing we had was our budget meeting before we cut out for the Thanksgiving holiday, and we wrapped up. I think we'll be talking about that as we move into the next part of this meeting. And then we will get together as a group in the spring to kind of see where we're at, right? If I recall correctly.
Yep, the capital budget.
Yep, capital budget group. So other than that, and then this week, tomorrow there's a school building committee meeting. Thursday night I'll be attending the ZBA meeting. And then this weekend's a busy weekend because we've got the holiday stroll Friday night, we've got the parade Saturday, and we have the Angel Run Sunday. So good holiday weekend here in Medfield.
So I actually did have a town administrator update just to remind everybody that we are closing 109 for the holiday stroll.
What time?
We're going to start closing it at 4.
Okay.
Hard close at 4:30 to reopen around 8:30 as the evening ends.
And then the police will be making use of the drone, so they'll be able to monitor what's going on in the back roads. But we're stopping at Brook Street, rerouting people so they will pop out at 27 and 109.
Yep, they have a whole, we were able to sit on an operations meeting today, and it's a tremendous amount of work they are doing for the holiday stroll this year in terms of traffic and crowd management, since
Well,
we're closing the road.
And what's really good, if you think about it, normally for the holiday stroll, there are cars going down 109. And with, the getting dark so early, it's going to be nice that families can have their kids out in the street. I'm hoping that some of the vendors take advantage of that. I know Parks and Rec will be in front of the town hall, so they're not going to be jammed up against the building. They'll have room to space out. Are they also making sure no cars are parked on
Yes.
109?
They'll be taking
Okay.
care of that as well.
Yeah, it'd be nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
That's great. And all the business owners along the area where we're closing were all met by the police department today to discuss everything, and everybody's on board with closing it. So,
Oh, good.
yep, good. Just a follow-up meeting.
Okay. All right. Hopefully we'll see people there at all the different events.
I came back into town this afternoon on 109 from Millis, and I think that the town message board is there telling people about the holiday stroll. I didn't see the whole message, but I saw the holiday stroll, so I'm assuming we're warning the world that they're that 109 is going to be closed on Friday. I just had and I would again reiterate that the Angel Run is on Sunday just because there's a tremendous amount of work that's gone into that, and I think of it as the Medfield's family-friendly event of the year, when families come out and get dressed up and the course is decorated. I don't know if they have the bell ringers, but that was one of my favorites, was seeing the bell ringers. And it's raises money for a good cause, for things in Medfield, people in need and needs of the town. So I had a couple things that, I also took a look at we got the notice of the state approving the single environmental impact report certificate for the Medfield State Hospital property, the Trinity Financial. And I was reading that, and that was, I don't know, is that about 75 pages, Bill? It was actually very impressive when you look at it's 20 pages of a document from the Secretary of Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, but then there are comments that are included, and the comments come from the Massachusetts Climate Action Network, Bill Massaro, John Thompson, Jim Nail, and Fred Davis. Some anonymous one, Hilly Passes, the Charles River Watershed Association, DCR, DEP, DOER. They were such thoughtful comments that it was very impressive, the amount of effort the town residents put into this. I just hope that Trinity is able to take the suggestions, and everybody made the suggestions in a very positive way of we're supporting Trinity's project. We just had some thoughts about how it could be made to happen better. And so I'm hoping that maybe Trinity can read those and have some bandwidth to maybe adopt some of those. So that's the first thing. And then I had a couple other things that I just wanted to mention, and these are just sort of not necessarily Medfield related, but just in sort of my worldview in the last week or so. I again watched 60 Minutes and was astonished that, I don't know if anybody else saw it, but it was this fascinating piece about this Lambert High School in Baltimore that has this biogenetics program for the high schoolers. And these high school kids have come up with a test and a cure for Lyme disease. And the person that ran this program, and this is a competitive test in school, there are like 10 applications for each spot in this high school. People actually moved to the city to be able to participate and have their kids participate in this high school. The woman that used to run it moved on because the federal government granted money to allow this to happen at other schools in the United States. These kids were going to a conference in Paris. 14 programs from the United States were at this Paris conference. 120 teams from Asia, mostly China. And then the kicker at the end was that our federal government pulled the funding for this program because they regarded it as too DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that this program that was training these kids, these high school kids, for this very high level biogenetic work, all of a sudden that's been pulled out from under the happening in the future. And so we just seem to be ceding territory to the Chinese in ways that makes absolute no sense to me. Doesn't have anything to do with Medfield this time. The last time it was the Chinese in the water system in Littleton that didn't make any sense to me. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that I watched a Frontline piece this week, and it's a documentary about the Ukrainian war. It's called 2,000 Meters to Andrzejów. It's a city, a town. It's a pretty small town And basically, this guy, it's the same guy who did the documentary that won the Academy Award about some other Mars Zapupal or something. I don't know the names in Ukrainian, I'm sorry. But it was basically farmland, but between the fields, there was this strip that was about 25 feet wide that was like a windrow. And all of the battle had to take place on this windrow because the fields on either side were mined. And so the Ukrainian forces had to move forward 2,000 meters to get to the town, to take the town and raise the Ukrainian flag. And you see what they did, and they do that, but the town is basically gone. As they said, the town is just an idea at this point, because the houses are all destroyed. There's nothing left of the town. And I'm scratching my head, and it's I mean, it's all documentary. It's not exactly pleasant, but it is really important and meaningful. And then I scratch my head and I think, why aren't we supporting Ukraine more? Why does Israel have an iron dome that prevents them from being hit by missiles? And why doesn't Ukraine have that same protection? I just scratch my head and I wonder. So that's it for me.
If you're going to propose that we have a committee of State, Department of State for Medfield.
We could certainly think of both, and Medfield supporting Ukraine.
Yeah. I'm sure that would have a big impact, I'm sure.
Yeah,
All right,
I'm sure.
you're done. Yes?
I am done.
Okay. I had three things. We had, on the 21st, we had an OPEB trust fund committee meeting. We usually have maybe a meeting like that once a year. I think we're actually a little behind that average right now. So really appreciate that we set that up, and especially because I was reminded that I was the chair of that committee. So it's really important to have at least one meeting a year. An observation on it, our liability, our total liability has actually gone up a little bit. We've been knocking it down ever since we started contributing. And it's not that we aren't contributing. In fact, I think our percentage of the total amount that we have as a liability that we funded has still gone up, even though the liability that remains actually got bigger. But one of the tricky things about the OPEB process is that it involves projections of assumed rates of return on investments, and it involves projections of assumed growth in OPEB, for anyone who doesn't know, is other post-employee benefits. So think of that primarily as healthcare benefits for retirees. And fortunately, Medfield, relative to other towns and cities in the state, limited its degree of obligation to cover that. There's a percent, we cover part of it, but not all of it, where some places used to give it away, be very generous. And the way that was used as a way to get people to accept lower salaries was to give them large offers for downstream retirement benefits that actually didn't have to be funded up front. The country in general, under the Government Accounting Standards Board, has tightened the rules on that. So if you take on a long-term financial obligation in a municipality like ours, or a city or a state, then you have to have a plan in place for how you're going to actually fund that long-term obligation, as opposed to what we've done historically, which is what's known as pay-as-you-go. You just take money in, pass the money out. As long as the amount of benefits is stable, that works. As soon as things like healthcare costs grow, then all of a sudden long-term financial obligations become an issue. So this is the first year that we've actually had sort of a downturn in our progress toward eliminating that liability, but it was largely a function not of our actual expenses, but of the way that the projections are made now. So it's always fun to try to figure out what to do with that information when you're trying to figure out how to navigate a path to a good ultimate resolution without burdening taxpayers today unduly for benefits that are going to be paid out 30, 40 years. The other item I had, and I think Eileen and Pete, you both probably got these same things. There was an interesting email that came in from a resident here in town who was looking for ways to increase the access and interaction between town residents and our state representatives. So both representatives in town and our state senator. I don't know if you all may have replied. I certainly sent one initial reply. I owe the gentleman who sent this in another reply to his follow-up back to me for sure. But anyway, I was glad to see there's residents in town that would like to increase interaction with our state reps. My guess is, if you put it the right way, our state reps would probably welcome the chance to talk directly with the residents in town. So it feels to me like that's something we should benignly support, but not get out as in a lead role, because at the point that it's the town asking the reps to talk to our residents, then all of a sudden it sounds like it's a formal town request, as opposed to residents just trying to figure out a way to make
Was that
sense.
the email where they talked about showing up at our annual town meeting and all that?
Yeah.
Because they do show up at that. I mean, they can't stay
Yeah,
the whole meeting.
yeah.
but yeah,
Well, they
okay.
wanted to have a question and answer section
Yeah.
at the town meeting, so I talked to Mike Pastore, and we suggested that the delegation come into a select board meeting to give a quarterly update on what they're working on.
Right.
But all of the delegation have office hours within Medfield, so I think they need to publicize that a little more, better, so that we can get more people. I know Brittany and I were the only people at the last one that Representative Tarski had,
So there's probably a little bit of promotional stuff that needs to
Absolutely.
know that's,
They're
in my case on the town meeting, I basically pushed back on the idea, and the person that I was talking to fully understood. In the middle of the town meeting, first off, anybody shows up at the meeting, they're not going to show up early to have a different discussion. I'm not sure if I were a politician serving even legitimately representing our town at the state level, that I would necessarily enjoy being brought into an open-ended town meeting discussion along with two other representatives. The senators in our state represent different, or they take on different issues than the reps. The reps could probably be there together if they were so inclined. But anyway, bottom line was the arguments I made against doing that and the burdens on the town administration to try to orchestrate a discussion like that, even as they're trying to get organized and check people in for the town meeting. I think that idea got pulled back, but the idea of having that is a good one.
It's a great idea for the select board meetings, and we've done that historically often, so.
I'm thinking that this is not something that we should have an official town board orchestrating.
Right.
I think we can facilitate a discussion, but I think it would be better to have people who want to talk to our state reps come to a place that's just there to talk to the state reps, and you don't need moms and dads from the select board overseeing what everybody has to say. So I think that's how I'd stay on it. The second one was the emails I think were already mentioned. There were some people from the Preservation Way Homeowners Association that were concerned that the contract that we had, or the agreement that we had signed somehow or another would affect their rights under their homeowners agreement. Bottom line is, we have no standing to change the terms of that homeowners agreement, so that was no way, shape, or form part of the agreement that we reached. And I hope they understood that. And then the last item was just kind of an interesting one. I was surprised. I think it just came in yesterday, and I, for once, responded to something quickly. The state auditor had sent out a survey on our views of the Massachusetts liquor licensing laws. And I think the auditor's purpose was to check to see if towns were looking for the state to give them more direct autonomy on the granting of liquor licenses. Although my responses they assured me would be anonymous, I will publicly state my answers were all along the lines of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I didn't argue for lots more licenses in Medfield, primarily because I haven't heard a clamor for lots more licenses. My only suggestion was, if someone who has a wine and liquor license can easily convert that to an all alcohol license, why do you have two licenses? Just make it both and let people do what it is that they want to do. But that was more for administrative efficiency than anything else. Look at that, 7:00. We
Filled the
did-
20
we
minutes
all
you
did a
had.
good job of filling that gap in to keep people interested and engaged. That completes our select board agenda. It is 7:00, so I think at this point we're ready to be joined by the school committee and the warrant committee for our general discussion about the budget.
Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone had a nice holiday. We Thanks for coming out on this rainy, dreary night. We had asked for this meeting, this joint meeting between the three committees, because as we went through our process in the fall for town meeting and the budget process, we sort of identified some issues that we thought needed discussion as a group, and sort of just get a plan together how we're gonna get from here to town meeting. So that's why we're all here tonight. I've prepared, I guess before I get started, we probably should do a roll call of, I'll do our committee, and then I suggest you do the school committee, and then the select board. So,
Emily McCabe, present.
Pete Saldino, present.
Peter Michelson, present.
Steve Callahan present, and Brent, you're online, can you hear us?
Yeah, Brent Nelson participating remotely.
Thank you. And Jillian Rafter can't be with us tonight, so.
Okay, so open for the school committee, Michelle Kirkby here.
Diana Priscilla here.
Leo Brem here.
Will Horn here.
Sophia Viglas here.
Gus? Go ahead.
Okay, and Gus Murray, Chair of the Select Board, you present?
Peterson, Select Board.
Eileen Murphy, Select Board President.
Great, okay. Well, you go to the next slide. Yeah, so after my brief presentation, and I promise I'll be brief, we thought that we'd answer questions. If there's questions about anything that I talk about, or if people are curious about stuff, that's sort of a question time. And then as elected officials, we thought select board and school committee members should have a discussion about what I'm going to present, and then we take public comment at the end. So that's in a nutshell what the workshop's about. The next slide is deals with just the 4 points of my presentation. You able to advance that? Okay. So really, the first one is just to go through. So anyone following online, there was some detailed budget materials on the forecast that is on our website. It's on the town's website. There's also a link to those materials on the actual meeting notice that went out, we're going to go through that at a summary level. And copies of that detail were provided to all the school committee members, the select board members, and of course the warrant committee. Then I thought we'd talk about our suggested quote ask of the departments for fiscal 27 and 27 as they develop their operating budgets. And then a timeline of key dates and things that we need to be mindful of as we progress to town meeting. And then at the end, we'll talk about some significant capital needs that the town has. Next slide. So this is sort of just a brief reminder for everybody that we do have some key financial policies and principles and objectives that guide the warrant committee in our work. And the first is trying to develop a budget. We have a priority typically for balancing the budgets without the need for a Prop 2.5 override. And we've been able to do that for the last 8 years as a town. We do We do have policies around use of free cash and using that for one-time type needs such as, putting money into a stabilization fund or other one-time needs articles that come up. And then obviously our operating expenditures, we carefully look at those to make sure that they're being covered by current revenues. And then lastly, just a reminder that when it comes to capital, which is separate from the operating budget, the town does not have the ability to fund significant building projects that are in our 20-year capital plan without increasing property taxes through a borrowing. And so, but those are some of the goals that we have as we go through our work, and we always strive to maintain sustainable budgets so that they can be sustained for a number of years. Now, in the warrant last year, the committee issued a letter talking about some of the challenges that we have as a town, in particular, pointing out some of the cost increases and stuff like that, and pointing out that the trend was not sustainable. So we also, it kind of, unfortunately, it came to fruition that trend, the sustainability of it, the concern arrived sooner than we thought. And so the next slide, we can go to that. And this is our preliminary forecast for the 27 operating budget. So we do is we start out with the revenue that's within Prop 2.5. And this is total revenue. And again, the details of this are all online, and copies were provided to everybody. But you can see that's growing at 2.5 or 2.7% in fiscal 28. We have some shared and fixed expenditures that are things like pension, health care costs, some general liability insurance. Those are rising at 7.7% in 27. So what it leaves you with is a available revenue for sharing with the departments of $686,000 in fiscal 27, or it's a 1.2% increase to their budgets. And so we have a formula we've been using for a long time of sharing that 75% with the schools and 25% with the municipal departments. And so, and we've asked them to, we also did a forecast for 28. It gets a little better, but not much in 28 with 1.6%. But as you can see, this historically we have approved larger increases than 1.2%. And so that's why we're here today, is to talk about how we get forward. There are some things that might change in this forecast, and we'll have a chance to update it when the governor comes out with her budget at the end of January for state aid. So but I'll talk a little bit about some of the key assumptions, if you go to the next slide, that are in the forecast. One big assumption is that the Medfield State Hospital does not move forward. And so there is no development or revenue from that development assumed in this budget. There is also, there's limitations on revenue growth, not just because of Medfield State Hospital, but other developments. There's not a lot of new growth assumed in the 27 budget. Matter of fact, it's decreased slightly from last year. We've assumed that a 3% on investment income. We've assumed a 3% return on short-term investments. This is predicting fiscal 27, so it's like 18 months out. And then there's a decrease in other available funds. One of the big drivers of the low increase in department budgets is the health insurance. Our health insurance has gone from last year went up 17%. This year we're anticipating an 18% increase in health insurance. And it's expected to increase at a 15% rate over the next 2 years. So this line item alone is over $1 million. And so it's a big number. There's also some additional enrollees that pushed it up to 18%. But as a town, we're like everyone else. We're experiencing a higher cost of healthcare in general, and we do have a high claim experience compared to the premiums that we pay in. So and it's mostly for drugs. And then on the other shared and fixed costs, there are some increases on property and liability insurance, and our vocational school enrollment is expected to go from 7 last year to 15 next fiscal year, and we get assessed on the number of students that attend the vocational school. Okay, so next slide. So our ask, and I know this is not easy. These are not easy conversations to have, but it's necessary, I think, to go through this process, and that is to develop department budgets that meet that Prop 2.5 forecast guidance, so the 1.2% for 27 and the 1.6% for 28. And as you go through that, we're anticipating you will not be able to meet that. If you can, that'd be great, but we're anticipating you won't be able to meet that guidance. And so identify specific services and cuts that you would make in order to meet that. And then we'd like you to rank and prioritize those cuts so that there's a priority of if there is an opportunity to restore them, we have a priority of how the cuts would get restored. And then if a warrant article is added to the warrant for a override, a Prop 2.5 override, we would ask that you develop operating budgets to restore those cuts according to that priority. And obviously consider the ranking and then as a committee, we would provide the guidance on the amount of the revised. If there's an override, we provide some guidance to you on the amount of that override, so that there's some order to the process, I guess. And then the next slide, I guess, is the timeline. So we're here tonight to have this conversation. Next week, as a committee, warrant committee, we will vote on the 9th on the guidance on the forecast for the budget that is within Prop 2.5, the 1.2 guidance, assuming it doesn't change. And then January 13th is another date that is important. That's the last date to add an article to the warrant for a Prop 2.5 override vote. And then on January 30th, we will hear back from the state and on the local aid number. If there is, whether it's more or less, we're going to adjust the forecast for it. We do that every year. It's the last adjustment we make. And so if they give us more, the 1.2 will go up. If they give us less, we'll have to reduce it. And then on February 1st, we'd like all the department's budgets finalized with the budget within Prop 2.5 and with any identified cuts submitted. And then on the 28th, we'd like to have a final decision on the warrant article. So the 13th, I'll just mention, is sort of it's a date the warrant closes. It's just, if we want to have a placeholder in there for an override, it can always be, dropped later on if we don't want to have an override. But by the 28th, we would like to know whether there's going to be an override and the amount of it. And that's because we have work to do to get the warrant ready. We have a hearing on the 31st, and we'll vote on all the final articles. And then on April 1st, we will, the town warrant and all the budgets with and without, the two budgets with and without the override will be finalized in the warrant, because that has to go to print in order to make it for our publication date. And town meeting is on the 4th. So that's sort of the proposed timeline, I should say. And that's, any questions on just that process and getting to town meeting and sort of make sense to people, or they have questions, concerns, or anything at all?
Steve, you made one comment that I just want to make sure that people understand. When you said that the Medfield State Hospital is not going forward in 2026 calendar year, not that it's not going forward, period.
Well, that's a good point. Let me correct that. So we've asked that two budgets get put together. One assumes that the one that I've talked about tonight assumes that the state hospital does not move forward at all. So there's no revenue in 27 or 28 related to the state hospital. There is another budget that that assumes that a closing occurs on the state hospital in October of 2026. The impact to the operating budget in fiscal 27 there is no impact because it just closed. We get some one-time revenue related to a building permit fee, but it's not that property doesn't get onto the property tax revenue until fiscal 28.
Okay.
So for purposes of fiscal 27, it's really a non-issue.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
I just didn't want anyone in the audience to think that we killed the whole deal and we're not going forward with the state hospital.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to make some more comments on that. We were told that it's not a certainty that it's going to close. Is that correct? That's the correct way to think about it? Yeah.
That's how I would put it. The process that we think we're following is dependent upon several years of MassWorks funding in the neighborhood of $5 million a year to fund the basic infrastructure for the site in order to make the project viable for Trinity. The first year contribution from the state showed up last year. This year, the MassWorks funding that's, at least we believe we're getting as things stand right now, is $1 million. So the question is now arising, if this is a three-way partnership between the town, Trinity, and the state, we need to understand what implications that tentative action by the state suggests around whether we in fact do have a partnership. We don't need 334 40B units anymore. We bought the property so we could control our destiny by putting up units that would allow us to avoid having to have 40B projects going in places in the town that we would prefer they not go. The delays in this project have led us to the point where we're on the verge, you can be more, actually, the Affordable Housing Trust rep, we're on the verge of achieving the 10% without the hospital.
Right.
Now, there's other good reasons why we want the hospital to be developed, so there's other benefits. But the original rationale and the importance we placed on this project have been diluted by the delays that, at least up to this point, I would say understandably, were caused to a degree by the state in terms of the limits it had on its ability to provide MassWorks funding on a short-term basis. So the underlying circumstances are different. We don't have the answer on what that all means. We're not throwing the towel in, but we might be pulling the knives out.
Okay, all right. So that's why either the budget's with or without the hospital, there's no impact on the operating budget in fiscal '27. That's the bottom line. So, but I think this last slide is really just a slide on to just highlight the slide before this, actually, the significant capital needs that the warrant committee thought was important to have a discussion about that. So they're listed here. These are ones that are going to come up in the next 5 years, according to active committees or studies that have been done on needs, or just buildings that have collapsed or whatever. So the Dale Street School is one that I don't think it's a secret to anybody that replacement, that project is going to. I should add that the size of all of these is not insignificant. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars when you add all of this up. And so there's the Dale Street School. There's other schools in the town where there are priority one needs identified around roofs, and also priority two needs around envelope replacements. Our Park and Rec department needs some space. And then we have a lot of water and sewer infrastructure projects that have been identified that need to be undertaken. So I just put that out there as something that the warrant committee thought that would be helpful to have, more publication about some of these capital needs that are coming up in the next 4 or 5 years. So I don't know. Are there any questions? Any more questions on? Are there anything online from anybody or? No questions. Okay, good. So how do you want to do this now? The next part of the agenda was really a discussion. This is a workshop, so it's meant to be interactive and, so I don't know if Michelle or Gus, how you want to engage in that discussion, or?
My first thought, Michelle, is that you've all heard everything here. If anybody has any immediate responses, I just leave it open as far as I'd look at it.
I can start with a question. So recognizing that health insurance is one of the big drivers right now in regards to cost, would someone be able to discuss a little on some of the actions that have been taken, if any, in regards to, mitigating some of these things, right? Like, and when we're looking at the healthcare plans, are we looking at alternative options? Are we looking at incentivizing employees to maybe get
To opt out.
an opt-out option, right? So they're not on our health insurance anymore if they need to. So I guess that would be my first question. Sure.
So 2 years ago, we formed the PEC with all of the unions. Select board approved the group. We started meeting and we changed our plan design. So at that time, we didn't have any deductibles on what they call the benchmark plan. So you're required under Mass General Law to have a benchmark plan that matches the GIC benchmark plan. For lack of a better term, our plan was more rich than the GIC with no deductibles. And at that time, we were facing a 7% increase, which we were horrified by, which now seems laughable. We were able to negotiate with the unions, and we came up with a PEC agreement, which is in effect until June 30th of 26. We added those deductibles on, and we reduced the health insurance by 2% for both the town and the employees, which was great. nobody saw what was going to happen last year. And that was kind of, we found out basically mid-January that we had this huge increase, which we kind of got caught up in a perfect storm of we were doing the right things, but then healthcare exploded for everybody and we got caught up in that and had the 17% increase. We can't negotiate until that is done. We have been working with our healthcare consultants. They have been analyzing other programs for us to go into. Currently, we are still less expensive than the GIC benchmark, but that does not mean that we are less expensive than the other plans the GIC could offer us. But again, collective bargaining is mandatory. Health insurance is mandatory subject to collective bargaining, so it has to be done that way. We have taken some steps. We have almost 50-50 split between active employees and retirees. So about a month ago, the select board instituted deductibles for our retirees on their health insurance plan, on their MedX Advantage plan. So that has been done. I don't think we can do anything for at least another year, but we're already actively anticipating looking at those changes. In terms of the opt-out plan, we've talked about it over the years. We just recently talked about it with Cook & Company, who's our healthcare consultant. They advise us to tread lightly on that. What usually happens is you lose your healthier people on your plan, and then our experience would be worse and our health insurance rates could go up. But that is something they are willing to take a look at us as we get closer to talking about that.
I will add that the warrant committee, at their meeting next week, we've asked to meet with the consultant Cook and Company
Okay.
to hear directly from them. So it's a real issue long term too.
Right.
Not just for us, but for everybody.
No, I mean, for example, the Hampshire County Health Insurance Group, they had a 20% increase last year. So they developed all their budgets with a 20% health increase. And then that JPA, the joint purchasing agreement, came back to them in October and said, actually, we're going to need another 20%. We had a meeting this week and I heard rumor, I don't know if this is true, if anybody from Hampshire County is watching, but they're anticipating a 40% increase this year. So there a lot of people are moving around and trying to decide what's the best thing. So we're looking into whatever we can to do. I mean, that's our biggest budget driver.
Okay.
And the PEC agreement, if everybody goes online, we've developed the fiscal year 27 budget website. We have all of our background materials and the PEC agreement is on there as well for everybody to see.
In the interest of having this be a discussion, I'll make one observation. On the last slide you had, it was the long-term capital, quick look at long-term capital. One thing I noted on that, and I've always noted this because when I was on the warrant committee, I kind of mentally just crossed off the enterprise funds, and it's like, that's the ratepayers, don't worry about it. And I'm complimenting the warrant committee on this. We have a budget issue, which is what's our FY27 budget going to be? Second budget issue, what's our FY28 budget going to be? But what I appreciate that the warrant committee has done here, I see it in the last slide, is that's a budget challenge. But the warrant committee is also thinking about the overall total cost impact on town residents and water and sewer rates, which are going to fund those enterprise fund projects that are sizable, PFAS and things like that. These are $1 million projects. At one level, if you're only worried about the budget, we can say, well, that's off budget. But I'm actually glad you all are not looking at it that way. It's not going to contribute, I don't think, to the budget problems that we have to get a budget in place. But there's a bigger issue here around what the town can afford. And even if some people can afford something in the town, not everybody can. My concern right now is a totally sort of different but related, which is with all the steps that the state is taking around affordable housing, 40B gets us to 10% of our households are 40B affordable. MBTA communities potentially could add a whole bunch more onto that. The accessory dwelling unit laws, with the way they've been structured, will add even more to the number of people who will be coming to town for our schools who are going to have options for not having to pay the kind of taxes that people have historically paid to support what we do in this town. So an ever smaller group of the total percentage of households is going to be shouldering the burden of what's going to turn out to be an ever larger burden on that small group in order to fund or afford the subsidized housing. I have grave concerns about that. 10% on a Medfield house, I get. 20, 25, 30% of people here subsidized. This becomes a radically different town. And maybe that won't happen, while I'm here, I don't know. But I'm concerned the overall economic structure of the town is being challenged by things that the state's doing. And make no mistake about it, the arguments around support for school budgets over all the years I've been here have been support the schools to have great schools so you get good return on your house. That's been a strong argument around budgets forever. Well, guess what? The state is doing everything it can to drive housing costs down. The fact that you have a good house is not going to exempt it from those market pressures when this goes on. So we actually are getting to a point where the state's objectives, as I see it, and in many ways the town's objectives, as we've thought about them, are going to be locked. That's probably a 10, 20-year observation. But I don't like the way the dynamics are lining up right now.
Mind if I?
Yeah, go for it.
I really appreciate all the work that's being done on this. I know what it takes to put a budget together and do the revenue and everything else. Right now, as of today, we're at 5.19 level service. So that's where we're at. So obviously the 1% isn't going to really work well for us. Is there any appetite, even if it's just for the exercise, an appetite to go through the revenue? And I know towns, Medfield, all towns, historically very conservative on projections, and be just a little bit more aggressive on the projections for local receipts in some of those areas and see where it gets us. It's going to get us certainly above the 1.2. And then, I think you always have the free cash because we're doing really well in free cash right now. You have that to fall back on if things don't work out. But I think when we look at the variances over the last 3 years of actuals and estimated numbers, and it's a lot, right? So you're looking at an average of 1.5 million a year over the last 3 years. That would help us right now. So I wonder if we do the exercise, we take a look at what we're doing for revenue and just be a little bit more aggressive in our projections and see where that gets us. Because I think one path is what Steve is talking about, just override and kind of go, maybe this gets us to a point where there isn't an override needed. Just throwing it out there. As a conference, and that's why we're doing a workshop to kind of talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that might be something to consider.
I mean, we've been through, as a committee, the projections on the revenue side. And I would say we were a little less conservative this year than we have been in the past.
Agreed. I would agree with that.
But I think there's a hesitancy to, we as a town rely on a certain amount of free cash to get generated in order to fund things like our OPEB liability, which is our largest liability. We need at least $650,000 of free cash every year to fund that.
What is our exposure on OPEB?
About 31 million, I think.
The liabilities are the largest liability, 31 million.
But that went up from 28 or 29. So that's the part that's a little frustrating. The game is a matter of choosing rates and discount rates, and then basing that, you do the actuaries do it. I think they're doing an honest job, but it's, last year it was 28, now it's 31.
What's our percentage? What's the percentage of that 31 million that we have covered?
It's the percentage of the 42
I think that's
million.
that's the net.
Yeah.
That's after deducting what we've saved. 8 or 9 million.
Yeah, we started off at 42 million when this first happened. There were certain structural things you could do that would get you a better rate.
Sure.
So if you established the OPEB trust, if you had a committee, if you did certain things where money couldn't just be taken out, all of a sudden your rate of return got better. It's that doesn't make any sense, but that's how they did it. So we started at 42 million, and I'm trying to remember now, if it's 42 and we're at 31, I was thinking that
That'd be
we
10
were at
million,
20, we had
25.
gone up to 29% of our total liability that we
We have
covered.
29%. Okay.
Yeah.
That was,
And that was up from 28.7 last year.
actually not bad amongst Massachusetts state towns.
Yeah, we're sort of in the middle, I guess.
I think we did, but we say 30th percentile. We actually were like better than 70% of town.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But, I mean, in regards to, I appreciate the question. I think it's something we're always thinking about, like, how can we make this work better? But, you know, I think we'll also continue to ask that question as we get closer to the deadlines. Maybe state aid will help, you know. We've assumed 2.5%.
It won't solve it, but there'll be a little bit in there.
Yeah, but the numbers are so big that we wanted to have this meeting because we can only do so much in a prudent way. You know, we don't want to budget things that we know are just we're not gonna get there. That's not the right way to approach it. You know, free cash, we have a policy that the warrant committee and select board have approved of only using it for one-time type needs. Problem with using it is, like, you can see, we've done 27 and 28. If you use it in 27, what do you do in 28? It's like, you know, so.
But can I just ask a question about that? Because I know that wasn't always the case about having it be one-time use, right? I think that was voted in at some point in the last 10 years or 5 years. So I guess that doesn't need to stay forever, right? Like, hypothetically, you could change the policy on how we use free cash.
Yeah, but there's a reason we did that. And that's that when you take operating revenues or operating costs and then use this free cash, that's not a recurring revenue source. So it's kind of like if you said, well, I can't pay for my groceries today, so I'm going to pull money out of the bank account because I'm not living within within the money I earn. So I guess we'll take money out of the bank account this month to pay for groceries.
Yeah, and
If you got a solution for how you're not going to have to do that in the second month, then maybe you got an argument.
I agree with that, but I think at what point do you say we have enough free cash? And what does our free cash hold compared to similar towns of our size? Right? Because so at some point, your free cash, you could just keep growing it. And at what point are you like, well, now we have so much free cash that, like, maybe we should be using it
We don't do that.
instead of.
We're not doing that.
Yeah.
So what's your max free cash amount that you'd want to hold?
We have a policy of 3%.
3%.
Yeah, 3% of operating expenditures.
What do we have
We
today?
hold, I think it's like, it's a little bit above that, like 3.2 or 3.3. 3.2 or 3.3, something like that. But I think, you know, the reason why we did it is because it's a best practice. I mean, the state tells towns this is a best practice to not use it to balance the operating budget. And you can understand the logic behind that because you could quickly get in trouble, right?
Yeah, no, I understand
You've
how
emptied your bank account,
finances
savings
work.
account, and
Yeah,
what
we
do
don't
you
have
do
to
in
put
year
as much
two?
into OPEB each year either. We
What's
could
that?
we could reduce how much we put in a given year into OPEB as well.
Yeah, technically you could, but
Yep.
I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, it's our largest liability, and the only way it gets smaller is chipping away at it.
Right, and it is set up there to support exposure to those benefits, which could be
Yeah.
used that given year instead of putting into it to pay those benefits that year.
You know,
And that
Leo,
is the purpose of the fund.
I've raised this with Steve before. If we were at 85% of where we needed to be,
Oh, I hear you. Yeah.
then I think
Yeah.
then you can have those kinds of, because, you know, okay, what if you take an extra 10 years to get the last 15%?
Sure.
Who cares? Because that's something that's covered 30-year
Yep.
obligation. When you're at the 29, 30% level and things are going up and your projections are getting worse, starting to let the air out of the balloon there is probably the wrong place to do that.
There's a bunch of us start to retire, right? I get
Yeah.
that. The actuary is going to sit there and start
Right.
up in your.
Especially in an environment where, you know, the healthcare costs are going
Well,
like this.
and I think-
So it's
and I
only
think
going to
there's
get
a-
worse the next time they rerun the assumption.
Right. Not to sound like a
Diana-
Marxist, but I think it's going to choke itself, right, at some point, right?
Yeah.
As these costs go up and we put more into here,
right? And we start digging in, at what point does it?
Well, our policy is to increase it at 5% a year. So we're still behind. I mean, costs are increasing at 18%. We're only increasing our contribution 5% every year. So we're still digging the hole. I think we have a question online.
Okay, can I just finish up the discussion here? The point about using free cash, you may not be aware of this. We have two major capital reserve funds that we have. One of them was passed with an override, special kind of override that came about a couple of years ago, where our major capital expenditures, they just get funded because the town agreed to fund it, and then we have the power to simply increase that by 2.5% every year, and it just goes in, and that's not hitting our tax levy limits or anything. That's being funded that one is being funded straight as a straight override. There is a second reserve fund, which is kind of the capital, I forget the name of it, capital equipment fund.
Just capital
So it's
stabilization.
basically the maintenance of the small stuff. We never went to the town for an override on that. That has been funded over all these years by the free cash that we have. So in other words, we didn't throw it onto the tax levy we basically have been using free cash. So the thing that you're suggesting we could do for operating expenses, we haven't done it for that, but we have applied it to reserve funds in order to avoid having to collect taxes to fund it. So.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And, so most of our free cash goes to OPEB and capital, this capital fund. But before we established that capital fund, we were using free cash to balance the operating budget. You know what happened? We didn't buy police cruisers, ambulances. We didn't buy a lot of things for a number of years, and we got way behind. So that's kind of what happens.
So I'm not going to give up on that just yet. So I just want to talk a little bit about the local receipts. I think it's an important point to talk about. So the variance on local receipts, FY21, 1.3 million, FY22, 852, FY23, 1.7, FY24, 1.9, FY25, 1.5. So all I'm asking is if we can do even the exercise of just being a little more aggressive and not being so conservative like all towns are, and seeing what that can get us. That's all.
Yeah.
I
mean,
think that's real money.
Yeah.
It's real money that's there.
Right. I mean, a big piece of that is investment income.
It sure is. Yep.
And we all know the way we budgeted investment income in the past was, rates were going up, but we intentionally budgeted a lower amount because we didn't want to guess at a high rate and be wrong, right? So that's why some of the big variances got generated when rates were going up. But when rates go down, the opposite happens. If you're you don't get as much income. So if you overestimate, we're using a 3% rate, which is, it's probably as optimistic as you can.
Motor vehicle has been pretty low. The excise, those numbers have been low.
The motor vehicle is.
Meals tax has been low.
Meals tax has been, that's been a little bit low, not too much. Yeah, $43,000. That's not going to balance the budget.
No, but it's going to help.
The motor vehicle excise tax, that
463, 150, 147, and 556, 493 the last 2 years.
Right.
There's money there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a conversation, right?
We understand that. We understand that particular one is conservative. But we also understand we need $2 million of free cash that comes from somewhere in order to do capital projects and
That's
to
fair.
and to fund OPEB. So that's why, there's a couple areas where we know we're being conservative. That's one of the ones. Yeah.
We're also funding the elementary school stabilization fund with free cash as well. So that's another one.
Yeah, the $900,000 that we're putting in the last couple of years has come from free cash, which will go to reduce taxes once that debt is taken on. So, no, but I hear you. I mean, we're trying to look at everything.
I know you are.
Yeah,
I know you are.
yeah,
Just
it's
put it out there. It's a workshop.
yeah.
We've also asked the insurance company, right now, we have a $5,000 deductible for our buildings. We've asked them to run some rates with a $15,000 deductible for any large losses we have. So hopefully we'll see a reduction in that as well.
What's the total liability on that plan? It's about 600,000 a year or so.
We don't know yet. They're running the
What's it
numbers
this
for us
year?
now. I don't even have an estimate for it.
No, but what do you pay this year for that?
Oh, this year for insurance, we have, let's see. Property and liability, we are estimating 401,000.
Oh, it'll do something, but
It's going to do something, but it's not going to do.
It's gonna be.
Yeah. We also don't have this budget forecast is, we're early. As Jeff said, we're in the beginning of the process. So we don't have any of the credits that we would normally have. For example, last year, Maya, who's our insurance company for property and liability and health insurance, recognized that everybody was having such increases in health insurance, started offering all these incentive and credits.
Yeah.
So, so we actually were able to apply $100,000 worth of credits from property and liability to offset the budget when we had that crisis in February, finding out we needed to cut more.
And Jeff, just so you know, that so on the investment income line, we did increase that budget like $300,000 from 26 to 27. It was 660 and 26. We increased it to 996 and
Right.
27.
Thank you.
And then
Yeah, definitely not as conservative as it
on
has
the
been in the
on the
past, for
motor
sure.
vehicle excise, we increased that by 350,000. It went from 2.2 million to now we increased it to 2.6, which so we took some of the conservatism out. I'm not saying all of it because we
Right.
do need some. So
That's fair. Thank you.
yeah. Why don't we do the question?
I guess this is from Renee S. I guess it's time to make some very difficult choices when it comes to healthcare costs, as being discussed, and also perhaps pension plans. In our company, they decided to stop pensions for employees in 2007 because of the overall costs, but they did provide percentage match for 401k plans with employees. What about looking at options for removing pension plans for future employees and instead replacing with 401k matching plans? This is probably an obvious, albeit unpopular idea.
Someone want to field that?
Yeah, can't do it.
You can't do it under Mass General Law. Public employees we have an obligation for our public retirement system, and we're part of the Norfolk County retirement system. We're not self-insured on that.
That would require state action. Yeah.
And we're part of
And
Mass
that's
Teachers
only on the-
Association,
Mass- sorry, I
Retirement,
mentioned
yeah.
that.
But I think you should point out that's also only on the health insurance. They pay for their own pension plan. There's no match. That 11% or 13%
Right,
that
we're
we're
all
paying
paying
now,
into the
that
health
doesn't
insurance,
come from
the
the towns.
retirement.
That comes out of the employee.
Yeah, the current employees, there is an obligation for employees before a certain date that we made promises to for pensions. That's not funded, but that's projected to be funded by 2036, the unfunded piece. And so that piece is still running through our operating budget. It's like over $3 million a year. But there's nothing we can do about that because it's a promise we made. We have to pay it. Yeah.
Dr. Marston, quick question here just to clarify. When you said earlier 5.19 for level service for the school, is that 5.19% above the FY26 budget is
Correct.
what's needed?
46,913,342.
So basically, we're looking for a $1.8 million
Gap
to
right now.
maintain level
Yeah,
service. That's the
1.8.
that's basically just what I wanted to point out is that
And as the school committee knows, in the beginning in December, it's always the highest number. So once we refine retirements, all those kinds of things, it gets down lower, but that's our first crack is 5.19.
And the town's a little over 3%, what we need to retain level service.
You know,
Wouldn't have been able to fit that in without the insurance problem.
Right.
And if the
Is that right?
total 2.5% for the year is 1.8, right here on the top line here.
So even without health insurance, we wouldn't be able to fit that in.
Correct. Yeah. I did mean that. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, that's right. That's correct. I mean, I think, and he's just talking about the school side. So we have the town side too. So, I mean, it's, I think, I know this process we laid out is not comfortable, but even if people, want to pursue an override, we still have to go through this exercise of having a budget because we don't know what will happen with the vote. So we don't know if it'll pass the town meeting. We don't know if it'll pass at the ballot, at an election. So we have to have two budgets, one with it and one without it. So.
Well, and Steve, when you use the term uncomfortable, I mean, we'll just call the elephant out in the room. I mean, so if anyone's listening, that's when the town has to then start looking at what services would be cut, because that's going to start saving costs. And then you have to start looking at other bodies, right? Other jobs that are leaving. And I know I've talked to Christine many times. I mean, at least I'll speak for myself. You look at services first, right? We're not looking to have jobs reduced. But that is the ugly conversation, that if 2.5 doesn't get passed and we don't have the money, there's really hard decisions. It's a school
Absolutely the case
decision.
in the schools, absolutely.
And so that's why it's really important when residents at home listening to this. I mean, these are things that are hard, and we haven't had to face this. My 4th year on the select board, and this is the first year we've had a squeeze point, right? And so, and if you can take anything from sitting at the table tonight, no one's taking this lightly. It's not like, oh, no big deal. This is a huge deal because I look at Sarah back there, with the Council on Aging. We don't want to have to see days reduced there. Or I look out and I think of certain things that the DPW does that, we love in this town, and we don't want to have to reduce that. So it's a hard conversation.
But one of the things we have to do is educate residents, right? And they need answers to all those questions. We have to identify where the cuts are, and they need to understand what they are and which ones might be restored, right?
Yep.
So you kind of have to tell that story and communicate, and that needs to be in the warrant book that gets mailed to everybody. So it's a lot of work, I know.
And it may have been mentioned earlier, I think it's important to say that how much of the budget is salaries? Like, do we have a percentage?
80%.
80%, so, yeah. So,
Cutting services, you're cutting people.
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
Yeah. So.
There's a bad news point and then a good news point, I guess, from my personal perspective. The thing that I wrestle with here in terms of, we're sort of having a little bit of talk about how to pull the rabbit out of the hat for FY27. And if the issues that we're dealing with are structural, then it's going to be a rabbit and a half next year, and it's going to be 2 rabbits the year after that. So if we saw the problem we have for 2 years is an explosion in healthcare costs, which is a bit of a blip. And interestingly, Steve, when we got briefed on the update from the actuary, their projections don't show healthcare just holding at 18% for the foreseeable future. They basically see this blip, and then it's not that it's going to go down to a small number, but it's going to actually drop off, which
level off.
I took as level off. Yeah. I took as at least sort of good news, in that it wasn't just getting worse and worse and worse. So it's not exactly like it's not a one-time event. I don't think it's just a 2-year event. I think you would call this structural. And the problem is, when it's structural, you can't use one-time solutions to backfill unless it's just a transition management issue that you've got or something like that. That's our problem. I don't think we're going to really solve this by non-structural responses ultimately. I don't think the problem goes away. That's the bad news. Good news is somebody I hope has a reputation in this town as being the financial hawk after my 6 years on the warrant committee, if not since. The view I've always taken about overrides has been, if wages are going up, as they have for a number of years, at less than 2.5%, when you go to a person who's earning a wage and seeing less than a 2.5% increase in their wage, and tell them that they need to agree to a more than 2.5% increase in their taxes. What you're telling people is, we in the government have a better idea about how to spend your money than you do. On the other hand, if wages are rising above 2.5%, as I think recently they sort of have been, then all of a sudden the issue of considering an override is not as offensive, in my view, because as long as the taxpayers are seeing their incomes go up at something higher than whatever it is we're asking them to support, philosophically, I can at least get on board with the idea of making the argument that you're seeing more money coming in. We could sure use some of that help because we have people in the town that are also, constrained by this, and this might be the right time to consider an override. That doesn't constitute a full endorsement of an override on my part yet, but I think in this particular instance, what the warrant committee is trying to do, which is, okay, let's set, and Jeff, your point, let's come up with a Prop 2.5 compliant budget. And you're saying, well, okay, but where you draw the line, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. That's, I think, a legitimate question. But then thinking about what that override, that hypothetical override budget might be, is another interesting question. And I think there you might be able to look at what has our normal increase been, and that might start to give some sense of, are we doing this the way we've always done? And if the taxpayers don't want to pay for it, they may not want to pay for it. But I think this time around, we're going to have to paint a picture that, ideally at least, we have to reach a consensus on a picture of what an override scenario could look like. And I'm contrasting that with a few years ago when we didn't have consensus on what the override needed to be, and there were 5 different overrides that all passed. I had a hand in one of them, so it's not like I'm pointing fingers. That to me is the challenge that we've got, is to get the stake in the ground for Prop 2.5 compliant and what it looks like, and figuring out what gets cut. That's the way you communicate to the taxpayers about what they're giving up. And then coming in with what we hope that they'll approve, they then can see what the things are that are keeping. I can see that being a useful.
That we talked about with the warrant committee, that if we do propose an override for town meeting, we know that the school is going to have a special vote a few months down the line, right? So we have to collectively think of what are we going to tell the town about why they should, vote for these 2 things that will impact them significantly. So they can't really also be seen in isolation, which is why we put that second slide up that we felt was important, to also consider this budget, which is a multi-million-dollar problem that can't be solved by finagling a few numbers. And what does that look like long-term when we think of these other projects that we can't continue to kick the can on, right?
You had the consultant come in, I don't know, in the spring, then proposed that there's $100 million worth of roofs to be fixed and windows to be fixed.
120 million.
Yeah, 120 million. That was, not great. And so, these all get put into context. So it's not just a one-time override. It begins to be like, none of those can be paid out of the budget. So then you're sort of saying that's a 4-year override sequence, which is, not a easy thing to swallow.
I agree with all that. I was kind of wondering if someone might share a little bit of a history of Medfield of when there were overrides, because I wasn't around for that. I'm just kind of for me, the elephant in here is that we do. We'll need an override. We will need an override for the operating budget. We will need an override to build a school, and we will need an override to maintain our facilities in a good place. Now, I realize that's an unpopular thing to say out loud, but that's the reality. And I'm just curious, I recall watching a school committee meeting where Dr. Marsden went through many years in a